The massive display screen on the Coalition ship lit up with urgent warnings. The sensor operator's forehands moved quickly across the control panel as he tried to make sense of the readings. Something had just appeared at the edge of their space, and it didn't match any known ship signatures in their database. Senior Commander, we have an unknown vessel approaching the border of Sector 7. The operator reported, his voice steady despite his growing concern. It's different from anything we've seen before. Commander Bluestone stood from his command chair, his tall frame casting a shadow across the bridge. The Coalition had encountered many new species over the centuries, but all of them had followed predictable patterns. This ship didn't. Begin standard containment procedures, Bluestone ordered. Activate the immobilization beam and prepare for standard diplomatic protocols. The bridge crew worked with practiced efficiency, each member following the procedures that had served them well for over 300 years. The immobilization beam, their most reliable first contact tool, shot out toward the unknown ship. Nothing happened. The operator checked his readings twice, then 3 times. Sir, the beam, it's not working. They appear to have some kind of shield technology we've never encountered before. On board the human spaceship Thunder, Captain James Miller felt a slight vibration through his command chair. Report, he said calmly, years of experience evident in his voice. Sir, we're being hit with some kind of energy beam, the tactical officer reported. Shields are holding steady at 98%. No damage detected, but they're still trying. Miller leaned forward, studying the alien ship on his screen. It was beautiful in its own way. All smooth curves and gleaming surfaces, clearly built by an advanced civilization. But right now, it was making what he could only interpret as an aggressive move against his ship. Send out a warning message on all frequencies, Miller ordered, and bring our weapons online. Defensive posture only. Back on the Coalition ship, panic was starting to set in. Not only had their immobilization beam failed, but now the alien vessel was powering up what their sensors identified as weapon systems. This had never happened before. Their protocols didn't account for this situation. Sir, they're broadcasting some kind of message, the communications officer announced. It's using basic energy wave patterns. Should I decode it? Bluestone nodded, trying to hide his growing unease. The message came through in clear, simple pulses that their computers quickly translated. This is Captain James Miller of the HSS Thunder. Your unprovoked attack on our vessel has been noted. We are taking defensive measures. Cease your aggressive actions immediately, or we will be forced to respond. We are willing to open diplomatic channels if you stop your attack. The bridge crew looked at each other in confusion. Attack. They weren't attacking. This was standard first contact procedure. Every civilized species knew that scanning and temporary immobilization were the first steps to peaceful communication. Sir, the tactical officer's voice shook slightly. Their weapon systems, they're unlike anything in our database. The energy readings are off the charts. If they decide to fire. Bluestone made a quick decision. Shut down the immobilization beam. Send them a response using their same communication method. Tell them. But before he could finish, alarms blared across the bridge. 3 more unknown ships had just appeared on their sensors. The humans had called for backup. New contact designation. Human warships. The sensor operator announced, his professional tone cracking slightly. They're forming a defensive pattern around the first ship. Bluestone sank back into his command chair. In all his years of service, he had never encountered a species that could resist the immobilization beam, let alone one that could summon reinforcements so quickly. The protocols had failed them, and now they faced an unknown species with superior technology and apparent military capabilities. Send an urgent message to Coalition Command, he ordered. Priority 1. Message begins. Warning. A human warship is on the horizon, and our standard protocols have failed. Request immediate guidance. These humans, they're something entirely new. As Bluestone watched the human ships maintain their defensive formation, He couldn't shake the feeling that the galaxy had suddenly become a much more complicated place. The age of simple first contact procedures was over. The humans had made sure of that. The Coalition's high command chamber had never been so chaotic. 12 senior commanders argued loudly around the circular table, their voices echoing off the crystal walls. Reports from the border incident with the human ships played on multiple screens around them. These humans broke every protocol. One commander shouted, slamming his hand on the table. They resisted standard containment procedures. They called in armed reinforcements. They even threatened to shoot. High Commander White Peak raised his hand for silence. Unlike the others, he remained calm as he studied the sensor readings from the Thunder and its companion ships. In 300 years of first contact situations, we've never encountered a species that could resist our technology. This changes everything. Meanwhile, aboard the HSS Thunder, Lieutenant Robert Walker sat in his small office, reviewing the data from their encounter with the alien vessel. Something about their behavior didn't add up. He played back the sensor readings for the 20th time, watching the pattern of the alien's energy beam. "Captain," Walker called over the ship's comm, "I think I found something interesting about our friends out there." Captain Miller's voice came back quickly. "Go ahead, Lieutenant." "Their beam wasn't actually weapon-grade energy," Walker explained, pointing to his screen, even though the captain couldn't see it. "The pattern is all wrong for a weapon. It's more like, well, like when doctors scan patients. I think they were trying to examine us, not hurt us." On the bridge, Miller considered this information. The 4 human ships had maintained their defensive formation for the past 6 hours, waiting for the aliens to make their next move. The alien vessel hadn't fired any weapons. They'd only tried to use that strange beam again twice more. If they're not trying to attack us, Miller thought out loud, then what exactly are they trying to do? Back in the Coalition's high command chamber, the debate had shifted. A junior science officer had been called in, and she nervously presented her findings to the commanders. "The humans appear to be highly adaptable," she explained, showing detailed scans of the Thunder's rapidly adjusting shield frequencies. "Their technology isn't necessarily more advanced than ours, but it's different, unpredictable. They solve problems in ways we never considered." "Impossible," another commander interrupted. "All spacefaring races follow the same technological progression. It's basic science." "Not the humans," White Peak said quietly. "Look at their ship designs, their weapon configurations, even their command structure. They developed along a completely different path than us." Lieutenant Walker's voice came over the Thunder's comm system again. "Captain, I've decoded more of their communications. They keep using words like procedure and protocol. I don't think they're warriors at all. They're bureaucrats. Very advanced, very careful bureaucrats." Miller rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "So when they tried to scan us, they were probably following their standard first contact checklist," Walker finished, "and we scared them by resisting." The Coalition's high command was reaching a similar conclusion. White Peak had pulled up historical records of their first contact procedures. "Our ancestors designed these protocols to be absolutely safe and predictable. Every species we've met has understood and accepted them. But the humans, they saw our safety measures as an attack," the science officer added. "Their response wasn't aggression, it was self-defense." In space, the standoff continued. The human ships maintained their formation, while the Coalition vessel kept its distance. Both sides were starting to realize they had completely misunderstood each other, but neither knew how to break the stalemate without risking further misunderstandings. "Sir," Walker's voice had an urgent edge now. "The alien ship is broadcasting again. But this time, it's different. They're trying to match our communication protocols." Miller leaned forward in his chair. "Put it through." The message was simple. "We regret the confusion. Our actions were meant as peaceful first contact procedure, not attack. Request permission to attempt communication without scanning technology." Miller smiled. Maybe these aliens weren't so different after all. They could learn and adapt too. He pressed the comm button. "This is Captain Miller. Permission granted. Let's start over, shall we?" In the high command chamber, White Peak allowed himself a small smile as the humans accepted their message. Perhaps it was time for the Coalition to learn some new protocols. The alarms on the Thunder blared as 5 more Coalition ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel. Captain Miller watched them take up standard pursuit positions behind his ship. The brief moment of understanding they'd reached was now complicated by the arrival of a Coalition containment fleet that hadn't gotten the message about peaceful contact. "They're not responding to our signals," Lieutenant Walker reported from his station. "These must be automated response ships. Their protocols probably required them to send reinforcements when the first contact went wrong." Miller nodded grimly. "And I bet those ships don't have the authority to stand down without orders from their command." He studied the tactical display, noting the dense asteroid field ahead. "How long until Coalition Command can send new orders to their ships?" "At least 2 hours, sir. Their communication system seems to require multiple approvals." The pursuing Coalition ships fired their immobilization beams. The Thunder shields flickered but held firm. In the engine room, Engineer Lisa Thompson watched her power readings spike. She'd been studying the alien beam's energy pattern and had an idea. "Captain," she called over the comm, "I think I can use their own beam against them. Our shields aren't just blocking it. They're absorbing some of the energy. If I reroute that power through our maneuvering thrusters." "Do it," Miller ordered without hesitation. He trusted his engineer's instincts. "Helm, take us into the asteroid field. Let's show them what this ship can really do." The Thunder dove between 2 massive asteroids, its enhanced thrusters giving it unprecedented maneuverability. The Coalition ships followed in their strict formation, their computers calculating safe paths through the field using standard protocols. On the lead Coalition ship, the automated commander's systems registered confusion. The human vessel was moving in ways that defied their predicted patterns. Instead of avoiding asteroids, it was using them as cover, even bouncing its shield energy off their surfaces to change direction faster than should be possible. Lisa's voice came over the Thunder's comm again, excited despite the tension. "Captain, every time they hit us with their beams, I'm converting more power to our thrusters. We're actually getting faster. They're literally helping us escape." Miller allowed himself a small grin. "Walker, make sure you're recording all this. The Coalition's going to want to know how their containment protocols turned into an impromptu engine booster." The Coalition ship's computers struggled to adapt. Their programming told them to maintain formation and continue pursuit, but the human ship's erratic flight path made this increasingly difficult. One ship scraped its hull on an asteroid while trying to follow the Thunder through an impossibly tight turn. "Sir," Walker called out, "one of their ships just broke formation to avoid a collision. I think we're starting to overwhelm their automated response protocols." The Thunder twisted through the asteroid field like a leaf in the wind, each burst from the Coalition's beams making it more agile. Lisa had turned their supposed containment measure into an advantage, demonstrating the human gift for turning problems into solutions. The Coalition ships began to fall behind one by one, their rigid programming unable to match the Thunder's adaptive tactics. Their formation broke apart completely when the human ship used an asteroid's gravity to perform a slingshot maneuver that their computers classified as impossible. "Coalition ships are falling back to their minimum safe distance," Walker reported. "I think we just broke their pursuit protocols. They're not designed to handle a ship that gets more powerful the more they try to stop it." Miller watched the tactical display as the Coalition ships regrouped at the edge of the asteroid field. They maintained their position there, seemingly unable to decide between continuing their programmed pursuit and acknowledging that their target had done something outside their parameters. "Send a message to Coalition Command," Miller ordered. "Tell them their containment fleet is stuck in a logic loop out here. And add that we'll be happy to explain how we turned their immobilization beam into a propulsion boost once they get their ships under control." Lisa's laughter echoed through the comm. "Should I write up a technical manual for them, sir?" How to turn your enemy's technology into a speed boost in 5 easy steps. Maybe leave that part out, Miller smiled. I think we've given their protocol writers enough headaches for one day. The Thunder hung in space at the far edge of the asteroid field, its enhanced systems humming with borrowed energy. Behind them, the coalition ships waited for new orders, their computers still trying to understand how their perfect containment protocol had been so thoroughly turned against them. The quiet on the Thunder's bridge was broken by a sudden alert from the sensor station. Lieutenant Walker leaned forward, adjusting his readings to make sure he wasn't seeing things wrong. Captain, one of the coalition scout ships that was chasing us just hit a dense asteroid cluster, he reported. They're venting atmosphere. Their power systems are failing. Captain Miller stood from his chair, watching the damaged coalition ship drift helplessly. The other coalition vessels had stopped their pursuit but seemed frozen in place, their automated systems unable to process this unexpected situation. What are their ships doing about it? Miller asked, though he already suspected the answer. Nothing, sir, Walker replied. They're just waiting. I think this scenario isn't in their standard rescue protocols. The damaged ship's distress beacon is active, but the others aren't responding. The Thunder's crew watched as emergency lights flickered on the coalition vessel. Its sleek hull was now scared by asteroid impacts, and a thin trail of atmosphere leaked into space. Through the ship's windows, they could see the crew moving in panic. How long do they have? Miller asked. Lisa's voice came over the comm from engineering. Based on their atmosphere leak and failing power readings, maybe 20 minutes. Their backup systems are trying to compensate, but they're not going to make it without help. Miller looked at his tactical display. The coalition ships that had been chasing them were still maintaining their position, their programming apparently unable to handle this crisis. Coalition command was still too far away to help. He took a deep breath and made his decision. Helm, bring us about. Walker, broadcast our intentions to approach and assist. Engineering, prepare emergency repair teams. The bridge crew exchanged glances but moved to obey. The Thunder turned gracefully and began moving back toward the damaged ship. The other coalition vessels' weapons tracked them but didn't fire, probably because enemy ship returns to help wasn't in their threat assessment protocols. Sir, Walker said hesitantly, are you sure about this? They were just trying to capture us. Miller nodded. Those crew members are going to die if we don't help. Whatever our disagreements with the coalition, we're not going to sit here and watch that happen. The Thunder approached the damaged ship carefully. Up close, they could see the coalition crew pressed against their windows, watching the human ship with a mixture of fear and desperate hope. Broadcasting in all formats they might understand, Walker announced, telling them we're coming to help and requesting they lower their shields. What's left of them, anyway? The coalition crew must have understood because their failing shields flickered and died. The Thunder moved in close, extending its own shield bubble to help contain the leaking atmosphere. Lissa led her engineering team to the airlock, carrying tools and emergency patches. Their atmosphere is compatible with ours, Walker reported. They're opening their emergency airlock for us. The next hour was a blur of activity. The human engineering team worked alongside the confused but grateful coalition crew, patching hull breaches and stabilizing power systems. Lissa figured out how to connect the Thunder's power grid to support the damaged ship's life support, improvising an interface between their different technologies. The other coalition ships watched all of this without interfering. Their weapons remained armed but inactive as they observed the humans, saving their colleagues, an action that probably contradicted everything they'd been programmed to expect from an hostile species. Finally, Lisa's voice came over the comm again. Captain, we've got them stabilized. Their power's back online, and we've sealed the major hull breaches. They'll need proper repairs, but they're not in danger anymore. Miller watched through the view screen as the coalition crew members worked with his engineering team, their initial fear replaced by something like wonder. Some were touching the emergency patches the humans had installed, apparently amazed by how the humans had adapted coalition technology to work with their own. Sir, Walker called out, "I'm getting a transmission from Coalition Command. Well, they're having trouble processing our actions. Apparently, their entire first contact protocol is based on the assumption that unknown species are either harmless or hostile. They don't have a category for potentially dangerous but willing to help." Miller smiled. "Tell them they might want to add that category, and inform them their crew is safe once they figure out the proper protocol for saying thank you." The Thunder's mess hall had never seen such an unusual gathering. Coalition officers sat with human crew members, their tall frames awkward in chairs designed for human bodies. The rescued ship's leader, who the humans called Officer Mark for simplicity, watched in fascination as Captain Miller poured him a cup of coffee. "You mean you drink this stimulant regularly?" Mark asked, his translator working better now that both sides had time to calibrate it properly, without filing the proper consumption forms. Miller couldn't help but smile. "We find that sometimes you need to make quick decisions without paperwork, like when someone needs rescue in space." Mark looked down at his coffee, then at the human crew members chatting with his own people. The rescue had shaken everything he thought he knew about spacefaring species. His training had taught him that advanced civilizations followed predictable patterns, yet here were the humans, breaking every rule he knew. In engineering, Lisa was showing some Coalition technicians how she had modified their emergency patches to work with Coalition hull materials. The aliens watched in amazement as she sketched out her ideas on a tablet, making changes on the fly. "But how did you know it would work?" one of them asked. "Where are your test procedures, your safety protocols?" Lisa shrugged. "Sometimes you have to trust your understanding of the basic principles. In an emergency, you work with what you have and adapt as needed." The concept of adaptation seemed to both fascinate and terrify the Coalition crew. Their entire civilization was built on careful planning and predictable outcomes. The idea of improvising solutions went against everything they believed about technological progress. Lieutenant Walker sat with a group of Coalition officers, comparing notes on their different approaches to space exploration. "So you've never encountered a species that didn't follow your first contact protocols?" he asked. "Never," one officer replied. "All civilizations we met developed along similar lines. They all understood the need for proper procedures and safety measures, until you humans came along." In the medical bay, the ship's doctors were having their own cultural exchange. The Coalition medical officer was amazed by how humans healed. "Your bodies adapt to damage," he said, studying a medical scan. "You actually grow stronger from injuries. It's like your entire species is built to learn from problems instead of avoiding them." Miller and Mark walked the corridors of the Thunder together, their conversation growing more open as trust built between them. The Coalition officer stopped at a viewport, staring out at the stars. "We thought our way was the only way to advance," Mark said quietly. "We believed that civilization meant bringing order to chaos. But you humans, you thrive in chaos. You turn problems into opportunities. It's terrifying and amazing at the same time." "And you turn chaos into order," Miller replied. "Your protocols might seem rigid to us, but they've helped you build one of the most stable civilizations we've ever seen. Maybe we can learn from each other." The Coalition crew members who had been rescued couldn't stop talking about how the humans worked. They had never seen anyone adapt technology so quickly, never witnessed such fast decision-making in a crisis. Some were frightened by it, others excited by the possibilities. "Did you see how they modified our power couplings?" one engineer asked another. "No testing, no committees. They just did it. And it worked." Back in the mess hall, Mark finally took a sip of his coffee. His eyes widened at the taste, and Miller saw something change in the alien's expression, a small crack in his rigid worldview. "Perhaps," Mark said slowly, "some things don't require extensive protocols." The human and Coalition crews continued to talk and share stories, each finding their assumptions about advanced civilization challenged. The humans learned about the benefits of careful planning and systematic approaches, while the coalition members began to see how adaptability and quick thinking could coexist with technological advancement. As Miller watched his crew interact with the aliens, he realized they weren't just teaching each other about technology or procedures. They were showing each other different ways of thinking, different ways of solving problems. The rescue hadn't just saved lives. It had opened both species' eyes to new possibilities. The peaceful moment of cultural exchange ended when every alarm on both the Thunder and the Coalition ships started blaring at once. Captain Miller was back on his bridge in seconds, Officer Mark right behind him. Multiple ships dropping out of faster-than-light travel, Walker announced, his hands flying over his console. Energy signatures don't match Coalition or human designs. They're charging weapons. The view screen showed 6 dark, angular ships appearing from the darkness of space. Their designs were aggressive, all sharp edges and weapon ports. Before anyone could react, they opened fire on the nearest Coalition ship. "Raiders," Mark exclaimed. "They prey on damaged ships. Our protocols state we should retreat and call for reinforcements, but our engines aren't at full power yet." Miller watched as the Raider ships moved to surround them. The Coalition vessels began their standard retreat procedures, but they were too slow, too predictable. The Raiders had clearly dealt with Coalition ships before and knew exactly how they would react. "Not today," Miller said firmly. "Walker, send our combat data to all Coalition ships. Lisa, get ready to show them what those power modifications can really do." All hands, battle stations. The Thunder moved with unexpected speed, placing itself between the Raiders and the damaged Coalition ship. The Raiders hesitated for a moment, clearly not expecting to find a human warship in their hunting grounds. "Coalition ships," Miller broadcast, "forget your retreat protocols. Follow our lead and do exactly what we tell you to. Mark, get on the comm with your people. Tell them it's time to learn how humans fight." The Raiders opened fire with everything they had. They expected the ships to break formation and flee according to Coalition procedures. Instead, the Thunder's enhanced shields flared brilliantly, absorbing the attack. "Lisa, now," Miller ordered. The Thunder's engineer had done more than just repair the Coalition ship. She'd figured out how to link their shield systems together, creating an overlapping defense network. As the Raiders fired, their energy weapons were caught in the linked shields, bouncing between them in a dangerous web of deflected power. "Coalition ships, target these coordinates," Walker transmitted, sending targeting data to their allies. "Fire on my mark, using our shield web to guide your shots." The Raiders tried to adjust their attack pattern, but they'd never faced this kind of coordinated defense before. They were used to simple, predictable responses, not this mix of human ingenuity and Coalition precision. "Fire," Miller commanded. The Thunder and Coalition ships fired as one. Their combined shots, guided by the linked shield network Lisa had created, hit the Raiders from multiple angles at once. 2 Raider ships exploded immediately, their hulls torn apart by the unexpected coordination between human and Coalition technology. "They're trying to regroup," Walker reported. "Standard pirate tactic. They'll try to pick off the weakest ship." "Not if we pick them off first," Miller replied. "Mark, your ships have better sensors than ours. Guide our shots while we keep their attention." The Thunder charged straight at the Raider formation, its aggressive move causing confusion among the attackers. They'd never seen a defending ship attack before. Behind it, the Coalition ships moved with newfound confidence, their precise targeting guided by human tactical advice. Another Raider ship exploded, then another. The remaining 2 tried to flee, but Lisa's shield modifications had turned the entire battlefield into a trap. There was nowhere for them to run that didn't lead them into another coordinated blast. In less than 10 minutes, it was over. The Raiders were either destroyed or had fled, leaving behind only debris and a valuable lesson about underestimating humans and their allies. "I've never seen anything like this," Mark said, his voice filled with awe. "You turned our defensive protocols into an offensive strategy. You made our weaknesses into strengths." Miller smiled at the coalition officer. That's what humans do best. We adapt, we protect, and we never leave allies behind. Even allies we just met. Through the view screen, they could see the coalition ships moving into a new formation, not their standard defensive pattern, but a hybrid design that incorporated both human and coalition tactical concepts. It was a physical symbol of how both species had changed each other. Perhaps, Mark said thoughtfully, there's something to be said for having protocols that include unpredictability. 3 months after the Raider battle, the Thunder approached Coalition Central Space Station. The massive structure looked different now. Its once purely functional design now showed signs of change. New defense systems based on human concepts had been added, and ships moved in patterns that weren't entirely predictable. Captain Miller stood on his bridge, watching coalition ships pass by. Some now carried modifications inspired by Lisa's emergency repairs. Others had adopted human-style shield configurations. Each one broadcast a friendly recognition signal when they spotted the Thunder. Hard to believe this all started with them trying to scan us, Walker said from his station. Now they're naming protocols after us. The Thunder docked at the station, where High Commander White Peak waited to greet them. The tall coalition leader had been the first to understand the importance of what had happened in that first encounter. Now he stood with both human and coalition officers, ready to announce the results of 3 months of collaboration. The Thunder Directive, White Peak announced to the gathered crews, will replace our old first contact protocols. It teaches us that true civilization isn't about following the same path, but about learning from our differences. Miller watched as Officer Mark, now promoted to First Contact Specialist, demonstrated the new approach. Gone were the automatic scanning beams and rigid response patterns. Instead, the coalition had learned to combine their careful planning with human adaptability. We still believe in order, Mark explained to the assembled crews, but we now understand that there are many paths to advancement. The humans showed us that being unpredictable doesn't mean being uncivilized. In the station's engineering section, Lisa worked with coalition technicians. They had taken her emergency repairs and turned them into something new. A hybrid technology that used both human innovation and coalition reliability. Ships could now share power and shields in ways neither species had imagined before. The Raiders taught us something too, White Peak continued. We learned that sometimes the greatest strength comes from combining different approaches. The Thunder showed us how to turn our careful planning into an advantage without being bound by it. The station's command center displayed a new alert system. When unknown ships appeared now, the warning read differently. Unknown contact. Initiate Thunder Protocol. It meant being prepared for anything, not just danger or peace, but all the possibilities in between. Coalition ships still moved in formation, still followed protocols, but now they trained to adapt those protocols when needed. Human officers helped teach them how to judge when to stick to the rules and when to improvise. In return, coalition officers taught humans the value of careful planning and systematic approaches. We're announcing today that the coalition and human space forces will create a joint patrol fleet, White Peak said. Ships from both our peoples, working together, protecting our space lanes. The Raiders won't find easy prey here anymore. Miller remembered that first moment when the coalition ship had tried to scan them. How close they had come to real conflict, all because neither side understood the other. Now he watched as human and coalition crews mingled, sharing stories and ideas, each learning from the other's strengths. There's an old human saying, Miller addressed the crowd. The best defense is a good offense. But you taught us something too. Sometimes the best defense is being so well prepared that your enemies think twice before attacking. The station's viewing deck showed the results of their cooperation. Coalition ships now carried human-designed emergency equipment. Human ships had adopted some coalition safety protocols. Each had become stronger by learning from the other. Later, in a quiet moment, Mark showed Miller their new first contact database. The entry for humans read, approach with respect. Expect the unexpected. Remember the Thunder. You know, Mark said, When we first saw your ship on our sensors, we thought you were a threat to everything we believed in. In a way, we were right. You threatened our belief that there was only one right way to do things." Miller smiled. "And you taught us that sometimes having a good plan is just as important as being able to improvise." The Thunder's presence had changed the Coalition, but the Coalition had changed the humans too. Together, they had created something new, a blend of innovation and reliability, of careful planning and bold action. The galaxy had become a more interesting place, and any future threats would face not just one civilization's strength, but the combined power of two very different but complementary approaches. As new ships were launched carrying both human and Coalition crews, their hulls bore a new symbol, a lightning bolt crossed with a perfect circle. Order and chaos, planning and adaptation, working together to protect their shared space.